She tried to hide among the crowd. The Alpha King's voice said, "You, come here!" The streets of the kingdom were alive with color, laughter, and light. Lanterns swayed above, painting golden patterns on cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Music floated through the air, and the scent of spiced breads and roasted fruits mingled with the night breeze. People crowded the main square, eager to witness the festival of the blood moon, a night that came once every 10 years when the kingdom's greatest rituals were performed. Among the crowd, a girl moved quietly, trying to blend in. She was small, slight, with dark hair falling loosely around her shoulders. Her eyes, sharp and observant, darted from face to face, measuring the distance between herself and the others. Lyra had always been careful, always hidden. From the moment she could remember, she had been different, cursed in ways she did not fully understand. Her family had abandoned her when she was young, leaving her to navigate a world that feared what it did not understand. Tonight, she had come out of necessity, not curiosity. The city's festival was a rare opportunity to see the world without walls. She wanted to vanish in the crowd, to become nothing more than a shadow. And yet, even as she moved through the throng, her skin prickled with unease. The air seemed heavier here, as if something unseen watched every step. Lyra's instincts were rarely wrong. She slowed, scanning the crowd for anything out of place, her pulse quickening. That was when she heard it. A voice, strong, commanding, and impossibly calm, cutting through the music, the laughter, and the chatter of hundreds. "You, come here!" The words were sharp, deliberate. Time seemed to stutter. The crowd fell away as if invisible hands had swept a path through it. Lyra froze, her heart thudding in her chest. She could feel eyes on her, an intensity that made her feel both exposed and drawn forward. She looked up. There he stood, a man taller than any she had ever seen, cloaked in midnight blue with silver embroidery that glimmered under the lantern light. His eyes were a storm of gray, holding a depth that seemed to see every secret she had ever tried to hide. Kael, the Alpha King. The ruler whispered about in hushed tones in every corner of the kingdom, feared for his power and cursed for reasons no one fully understood. Lyra's breath caught. She wanted to run, to vanish into the mass of festival-goers, but her feet would not obey. There was something magnetic in the way he looked at her, a pull she could not resist. Kael stepped closer, each movement precise, deliberate, as though the world itself bent around him. Lyra's mind raced. How could he know her? How could he see her in a crowd of hundreds? And yet, there was no mistake. The air between them was taut with power, with recognition, with a promise of danger. "You are far from where you belong," Kael said, his voice low, almost gentle, yet carrying a weight that made people instinctively bow or step aside. Lyra swallowed hard. I am just passing through," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. Kael tilted his head slightly, studying her. There was amusement in his gaze, but it did not soften the edge of command. "Passing through?" he repeated, the words curling around her like smoke. "I do not believe in accidents. Not here. Not with you." Fear and curiosity warred within Lyra. She wanted to vanish into the shadows, but something told her that running would not save her. She nodded slowly, stepping toward him. Each step felt heavy, as if the very ground resisted her movement, and yet some part of her wanted to see where this path led. Kael extended his hand not as a gesture of courtesy, but as a summons. "Come with me," he said. "Tonight, you will learn why I sought you out." Lyra hesitated, then placed her hand in his. The instant their fingers met, warmth surged through her. A strange energy, powerful and unexplainable, seemed to travel from him into her. Her mind blurred with visions, fleeting glimpses of shadowed corridors, of eyes watching from the dark, of a throne room bathed in silver light. And through it all, a whisper, her name, calling, urgent, insistent. The crowd faded around her. The music became a distant hum, The lanterns blurred into pools of light. All that remained was Kyle, the man who held both authority and danger in his gaze, and a path stretching forward into a world she had never dared to imagine. They walked through the festival together, and yet it felt as though they were the only two in existence. People moved aside silently, sensing the command in Kale's presence. Lyra's heart raced with a mixture of fear and fascination. He was the Alpha King, a ruler whose name could summon loyalty and dread in equal measure. And he wanted her. The palace gates loomed ahead, enormous doors carved from blackened oak and reinforced with silver. Guards bowed instinctively as Kale approached, opening the gates before him. He did not speak, yet the way he moved commanded the space, bending it to his will. Lyra followed, her mind a whirl of questions, yet she dared not voice them. Inside, the palace was a different world entirely. Candlelight flickered against tall stone walls, casting shadows that seemed almost alive. Tapestries told stories of kings and queens long past, of battles won and lost, of magic and sacrifice. The air smelled of old wood, parchment, and a faint hint of something floral she could not name. Kalea led her to a chamber at the far end of the palace, away from the revelry of the festival. Heavy curtains draped the windows, muffling the sounds of the celebration outside. The room was simple yet elegant. Dark wood, velvet furnishings, and a single low-burning lantern that threw light in soft golden pools. He stopped, turning to face her fully. "You have hidden yourself well," he said. "But some things cannot be concealed. Not from me." Lyra's pulse quickened. What do you want from me?" she asked, though the answer already frightened her. Kale's gaze softened just slightly.
"I do not wish to harm you," he said, "but I cannot let you remain in hiding."
"Your presence here is important." "More than you know." Lyra shook her head, trying to deny the truth she had always felt, that she was different, that she did not belong in the ordinary world. "I am nothing, just a girl who survives," she said. Kale stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "You are not nothing," he said, his voice low and unwavering. "You carry power, a power I have been searching for. And one I cannot allow to go untamed." Lyra's breath hitched. She had always sensed her abilities, small bursts of control over things she could not explain, but she had feared them, hidden them, believed they were a curse, and yet, in Kale's presence, they stirred, awakening in a way that was both frightening and exhilarating. A soft knock came at the door, and a voice, polite, careful, called from outside, "Your Majesty, the festival is at its height. Guests await." Kale ignored it. His attention remained fixed on Lyra. "Tonight you will begin to understand who you are," he said, "and what you are destined to face." Lyra swallowed hard, her mind a tangle of fear, wonder, and curiosity. She wanted to ask him why, how he could know her, why fate had led her to this moment. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, feeling the weight of his gaze, the pull of his presence, and the stirrings of something she had never known. Connection, recognition, and perhaps even trust. Kale's expression darkened slightly, as if sensing the question she did not ask. "The world outside this palace is not what it seems," he said. "Danger walks freely, and shadows hunger for weakness. If you are to survive, you must learn quickly." Lyra felt a shiver run through her. I will try," she whispered. He nodded, not a gesture of indulgence but of certainty. "Good! You will need more than courage. You will need wisdom, strength, and the willingness to face yourself." For a moment the room was silent, except for the distant sounds of celebration and the soft crackle of the lantern. Then, almost imperceptibly, Kale's hand brushed against hers, a touch fleeting yet charged, leaving a spark that lingered long after. Lyra's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from something she could not name. She realized that nothing in her life had prepared her for this, and yet some hidden part of her, small, stubborn, defiant, was ready to step forward. Kale's voice broke the silence, low and deliberate. Tomorrow, you will begin your lessons. Tonight, rest if you can. You will need all your strength for what is to come. Lyra nodded again, her thoughts a storm of doubt, fear, and anticipation. She wanted answers, wanted clarity, wanted to run, but a strange certainty rooted her to the spot. She was no longer just a girl in hiding. She had been summoned, chosen, and in some inexplicable way it felt right. As she settled onto the velvet chair, the lantern's light flickering across her face, she wondered what fate had in store. The shadows of the palace seemed to lean closer, whispering secrets she could not yet hear. And outside, beyond the walls, the festival carried on, blissfully unaware of the meeting that had changed everything. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the evening settle. She could not know the trials, the dangers, or the truths that awaited her. But she could feel one thing with absolute certainty. Her life had changed forever. And the Alpha King, with his piercing gaze and unyielding power, had marked her as part of a destiny she could neither escape nor fully comprehend. And somewhere deep within, Lyra understood that when dawn came, nothing would ever be the same. The palace was alive with whispers. Every step Lyra took echoed against cold stone walls, carrying with it a weight of centuries of secrets. Cale moved beside her like a shadow, effortless, precise, and commanding. His presence filled the corridors, bending light and air around him, as though the castle itself recognized him as master.
Lyra's pulse raced.
The halls were taller and darker than anything she had ever imagined. Tapestries depicting battles, kings and queens hung on the walls, but the eyes of the figures seemed to follow her. She kept her head low, hands clenched tightly, trying not to show the mix of awe and fear that churned inside her. Cale led her to a private chamber, one she knew she would never have found on her own. The room was small compared to the vast corridors outside, but the air within was thick with power. Candles burned in silver holders, throwing their light in soft golden pools that danced across the dark walls. "Sit!" Cale commanded, his gray eyes never leaving hers. Lyra hesitated. She obeyed, lowering herself onto the chair, feeling the velvet cushion beneath her. Her mind raced. She had so many questions. Why had he chosen her? What did he see in her? And why did she feel so drawn to him? But she could not voice them. His gaze made speech feel unnecessary and dangerous. Cale circled her slowly, studying her like one studies a rare bird or a predator sizing up prey. Yet there was no cruelty in his look, only focus, intensity, and the faintest hint of curiosity. "The court," he began, his voice low and steady, "is not what it seems. Beneath its splendor lies shadows, secrets, and threats that no ordinary person can withstand. And you are far from ordinary." Lyra swallowed hard. She had always known she was different, though she had spent her life denying it, hiding her abilities, her instincts, her very self. But Cale's words stirred something she had long kept buried.
"What do you mean?" she asked quietly. Cale stopped in front of her, his presence overwhelming.
"The people here, they are loyal, yes. But loyalty is fragile when fear is mixed with darkness. The palace carries a curse, a shadow that has lingered for generations. It feeds on doubt, on weakness, on mistrust. And it will not ignore you." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard whispers of curses, of shadows that could twist the mind, of monsters that moved in the dark. But she had never imagined that the king himself would speak of them so openly, or that she would be involved. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I am just me. I am nothing." Cale's gray eyes softened slightly, though his expression remained unreadable. "You are far from nothing. You have a gift, though you may not yet understand it. That gift, it is tied to this curse. You may be the one to break it, or to worsen it." Lyra's hands tightened in her lap. She had always been careful, always hidden, always alone, and yet she could not ignore the pull she felt toward him, toward the palace, toward a destiny she had never known. Cale stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Do you understand what it means to live in shadows? To always hide? To always fear what you cannot see. Lyra nodded, even though she knew words could not convey the full weight of her life. She had survived by staying unseen, by blending into the background, by pretending to be ordinary, and yet, for the first time, she felt that maybe someone had seen her truly.
That is why you are here, Kale continued. Because the shadows that haunt this court recognize you. They fear you in ways that you cannot yet understand. And I need to see if you can stand against them.
Lyra's mind whirled. Stand against them?
Against what? The palace, the shadows, the curse.
And yet, in his presence she felt something awaken, a strength she had never known she possessed. You will be tested, Kale said.
Not with swords, not with violence, but with your mind, your courage, your resolve. The palace will try to deceive you, to weaken you, to turn your own fears against you. You must not falter.
Lyra felt a chill, but also a strange thrill. For the first time in her life, she was not hiding from the world. She was stepping into it, however dangerous it might be. Kale's expression hardened.
And understand this, he said, his voice almost a whisper now. Every choice you make will matter. Every hesitation, every doubt, every fear. The shadows will exploit it. You must learn quickly, or you will not survive.
Lyra's pulse pounded in her ears.
She wanted to ask questions, to beg for clarity, to understand why her life had suddenly become so complicated. But something in Kale's gaze warned her that now was not the time. She had to listen, to observe, to endure. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional sound of footsteps in the hall outside, or the distant laughter and music from the festival. Lyra tried to memorize every detail of the room, every shadow, every flicker of candlelight. She did not yet understand why, but something told her that the smallest detail could be the difference between survival and disaster.
Then Kale spoke again, softer this time. There are those in this court who will seek to manipulate you, to use you, to betray you. Trust must be earned, and sometimes even those closest to you may become your enemies.
Lyra's stomach twisted. She had never trusted anyone.
Her life had been a series of walls and distances, and yet...
Something about Kale made her want to believe, made her want to take a step closer, even when every instinct screamed caution.
You are not alone in this,
Kale said, his voice carrying a rare note of reassurance.
I will not abandon you, but you must be strong, because the palace does not forgive weakness.
And the curse? It does not forgive hesitation. Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle on her shoulders. She understood, even if only vaguely, that she had been chosen for a reason. That her life, which had been so small, so hidden, was about to become something far greater. A soft sound outside the door made them both pause. A scratching, almost like claws against stone. Lyra's heart jumped. Kale's hand brushed hers briefly, a touch that was fleeting yet full of meaning.
Stay here, he whispered. Do not move until I return.
Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft, echoing click. The room seemed darker without him, the shadows pressing closer, as if testing her resolve. Lyra's hands trembled, but she forced herself to remain still, to breathe, to observe.
Minutes stretched like hours. The scratching sound grew louder, more deliberate, until Lyra could swear she heard voices, soft, whispering her name, calling her into the darkness.
She wanted to flee, to hide, to vanish as she had so many times before. And yet some deep, stubborn part of her refused. She remembered Kale's words, "Every choice you make will matter." She had a choice now, to run, to hide, or to stand. The shadows seemed to shift, almost alive, curling around the edges of the room, stretching toward her. And then, just as suddenly, they withdrew, as if something Dobb had ordered them back. Lyra's breath came in shallow bursts. She realized that the palace was not just a building.
It was a living entity, breathing and watching, full of power and danger. And she She was part of it now, whether she liked it or not. Hours later, Cale returned. He was calm, but his eyes were sharper, more intense than before. "It will not be easy," he said, his voice low. "The palace tests everyone. But you may surprise me." Lyra rose slowly, feeling a strange mixture of fear, anticipation, and something she could not name. Pride, perhaps, or the first taste of courage. "Why me?" she asked again, quietly. "Why now?" Cale's gaze softened, though only slightly. "Because you have the strength to face it."
And because I have seen what others cannot.
"The shadows fear you because they recognize the power you carry. And so, I have brought you here, to prepare you." Lyra's stomach twisted. She wanted to retreat, to deny the pull of destiny, to run back into the crowd where no one could see her. And yet, she could not. She felt, deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning. Cale's voice broke through her thoughts, firm and unwavering. "Tonight, you have witnessed but a fragment of what is coming. Tomorrow, you will step further into the court, and the shadows will test you again." "You must not fail," Lyra nodded, understanding more than she could articulate. She had been hidden, unseen, and safe for so long. That safety was gone. But perhaps, she thought, there was something worth risking, something worth standing for. As she sat alone in the flickering candlelight, the palace alive with whispers and shadows, Lyra felt a new certainty rising within her. Her life had changed. She was no longer just a girl in hiding. She was chosen, marked, tested. And as the night deepened, the shadows outside her window shifted once more, whispering her name with a promise and a warning that the court, the curse, and Cale himself were only the beginning of what she would face. The morning light barely touched the edges of the palace as Lyra awoke, the candlelight of the previous night replaced by a pale gray dawn. She stretched and rubbed her eyes, but the memories of Cale's gaze and his words clung to her like shadows. Her heart still raced. The palace, with its twisting halls and whispering walls, felt alive, watching, waiting, testing her. Cale had not yet returned. That alone made her uneasy. Every instinct told her he had gone somewhere important, somewhere dangerous, and she could not follow. Yet part of her longed to step into the unknown, to see the truths he had hinted at, to face whatever lay beyond the walls. She dressed quietly and made her way to the chamber's balcony. The city spread below her like a river of gold and silver lights. The festival had ended, but the whispers of celebration lingered. Smoke from the torches curled into the morning air, blending with the mist that rose from the river. For a moment, Lyra felt calm, almost normal. Almost. Then a soft sound behind her made her turn. Cale stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the morning light, tall and commanding as ever. His eyes, gray and stormy, softened briefly when they met hers. "You are awake," he said. His voice was low, almost a murmur, yet it carried weight. "Good. There is no time to waste. Today, you will learn why you have been brought here, and why the shadows fear you." Lyra swallowed, the words tightening in her throat. Death to the turncoat. She had never considered herself brave, but something inside her, a spark she had long kept hidden, stirred. She nodded silently, following him through the twisting corridors of the palace. They passed rooms filled with tapestries and ancient relics, doors that led to unknown chambers, and halls that echoed with the faint hum of power. Lyra could feel it now, the pulse of the palace itself, subtle and strong, as if the stones beneath her feet were alive. Cale led her to the edge of the city where the palace walls met the ancient forest. Beyond it, trees twisted toward the sky, dark and gnarled, their branches forming shapes that seemed almost alive. The air was cooler here, filled with the scent of earth and moss and something else, something old. Magic. Old as the kingdom itself. "This forest," Cale said, stopping at the edge. is older than the palace. It remembers every secret, every betrayal, every curse. And it will test you as much as I will. If you are to survive, you must face it! Lyra's stomach tightened. She had never walked in the wild alone, and yet something about the forest called to her. She felt it deep in her bones, a pull toward destiny she did not yet understand. Cale stepped forward, his hand brushing against hers for a fleeting moment. "Come," he said. "You must see for yourself." They entered the forest together. Shadows clung to them, weaving through the trees, shifting like smoke in the wind. Lyra's heart raced, but she kept her eyes forward, focusing on Cale's steady presence beside her. "This place," Cale said, "is where the curse began. Long ago, a betrayal was made. A king, desperate and fearful, used magic to bind his enemies, but in doing so he created a darkness that could not be controlled. The shadows you feel, they are the remnants. They feed on fear, on weakness, and on any bond that is untrue." Lyra's mind reeled. She had sensed power in the palace and Cale, even in herself, but she had not understood its depth. Now, walking among the ancient trees, she could feel it everywhere, the hum of magic, the pull of something unseen, the pressure of the curse waiting to strike. "Why am I here?" she asked. "Why was I chosen?" Cale's eyes softened, though his expression remained serious. "Because the curse reacts to you. It fears you. You carry something within yourself that can break it, or amplify it. That is why you must learn, why you must be ready. The court, the palace, the shadows, they are only the beginning." Lyra's pulse quickened. She had always hidden herself, always tried to be invisible. And yet, she realized now that hiding was no longer an option. The world had chosen her, whether she liked it or not. Cale led her deeper into the forest, past twisted roots and glowing runes carved into stone. The air grew colder, heavier, and Lyra felt the first stirrings of her own power. Small, flickering bursts that responded to her fear and determination. "This is why I brought you here," Cale said, "to awaken your strength. The shadows will test you, yes, but they will also show you what you are capable of. If you refuse them, you risk more than failure. You risk everything you care about." Lyra's stomach twisted, but she did not step back. Something in her, something long buried, demanded that she face this. Not just for herself, but for the world she had never belonged to, and for the man who had sought her out. As they walked, a soft rustling in the trees caught her attention. Shadows moved, slinking between the trunks, whispering in voices that sounded like echoes of the past. Lyra's heart raced, but Cale remained calm, his hand brushing hers briefly as he guided her forward. "You must learn to trust," he said. "Not only me, but yourself. The curse preys on doubt. If you hesitate, if you fear, it will consume you."
Lyra nodded, swallowing hard. She had spent her life fearing herself, fearing the world, fearing the unknown.
And yet, walking here, with Cale at her side, she felt something new, possibility, strength, and even hope. Suddenly, the shadows shifted violently, forming shapes that twisted and writhed, shapes that seemed almost human. Lyra froze, her fear threatening to paralyze her. Fear stepped in front of her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Do not run," he said firmly. "Stand! Face it! You are stronger than you realize." Lyra's hands trembled, but she squared her shoulders and faced the darkness. The shadows hissed and recoiled as if recognizing something in her. Then, as if guided by some invisible hand, the forms began to move back, swirling around her in patterns that left her dizzy. "You see?" Cale said softly. "They recognize your strength. They fear you. And so, you are already beginning to change the balance of this curse." Lyra felt a strange power rise within her, responding to the shadows, guiding them, bending them slightly with her will. She had never felt anything like it. And yet, even as she marveled at her own power, she could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. One wrong move, one hesitation, and the curse could strike back stronger than before. Kale stepped closer. "You are tied to me now as much as I am tied to you. Together, we can face this, but you must understand. Attachment carries risk. Every bond, every connection, every feeling. The curse will exploit it if you allow it." Lyra's heart pounded. She had felt a connection to him from the moment he had summoned her, a pull she could not explain. And now, hearing his words, she realized that their bond carried consequences far beyond her understanding. The forest seemed to quiet, as if holding its breath. Lyra looked up at Kale, searching his face for reassurance, for guidance, for anything that might help her understand the path ahead. He met her gaze steadily. "You will not face this alone," he said. "But you must be ready to make choices that will test everything you believe about yourself. And about me!" Lyra nodded slowly. Fear and determination warred within her, but she could not deny the spark of courage that had ignited the moment he had called her name. She took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of power within her grow stronger. The shadows in the forest shifted once more, forming shapes that seemed to watch, to whisper, to wait. And Lyra realized that this was only the beginning. The curse was ancient, vast, and hungry, but she was no longer the same girl who had tried to hide in the crowd. She was marked, chosen, and bound to a destiny she could neither escape nor fully understand. Kale extended his hand. "Come," he said. "There is more you must see, more you must understand. The forest is only the first step." Lyra took his hand, feeling warmth and strength flow through her as their fingers met. She felt the pull of destiny, the stirrings of power, and the promise of challenges that would test every part of her being. And for the first time, she felt ready. Together they moved deeper into the forest, shadows swirling around them, whispering secrets and warnings, testing her courage and resolve. And in the distance, Lyra thought she heard the faintest echo of laughter, soft, cruel, and knowing, that promised the trials ahead would be greater than she could imagine. The blood moon hung low in the sky, casting a deep red glow over the kingdom. Its light spilled across the palace walls, turning stone into shadow and silver into blood. Lyra stood beside Kale at the edge of the throne room, her hands trembling slightly, her heart pounding like a drum. The palace seemed alive, its walls whispering secrets older than any living memory. Every shadow, every flicker of candlelight seemed to watch her, testing her, daring her to falter. Kale's hand brushed hers gently, a grounding touch in the storm of fear and anticipation. "Tonight," he said, his voice low and unwavering, "everything will be decided. The curse has waited centuries for this moment. The choice is ours to make." Lyra swallowed hard, taking in the vast room before her. The throne stood tall, blackened and twisted with silver veins that pulsed faintly under the moonlight. Shadows clung to every corner, writhing like living things. The council waited, silent and still, their faces masks of fear and anticipation. Their loyalty was real, but their fear was stronger. "I don't know if I can do this," Lyra whispered, almost to herself. Kale's gaze softened, but his expression remained serious. "You can," he said. "You have faced the shadows, learned their patterns, discovered your strength, the power within you. It is more than survival. It is the key to freeing this kingdom. But you must choose, fully, without hesitation."
Lyra nodded.
She had learned much in the forest, in the shadowed corridors of the palace, and in the quiet moments with Kale. She had felt her own strength awaken, but this was the ultimate test. The shadows stirred suddenly, responding to her thoughts, to her fear, to her hesitation. They twisted and writhed, forming shapes that were almost human, faces that whispered her name and the names of those she had lost. Every step forward felt like walking through fire, every breath a battle between courage and terror. Kale stepped closer, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Trust yourself," he said. "Trust us. You are not alone, but you must be willing to risk everything."
Lyra closed her eyes, letting the memories of the past days settle. The forest, the trials, the shadows, they had all prepared her for this moment. She felt the power within her stir, responding to the call of the curse. It was dangerous, overwhelming, and intoxicating. "I am ready," she said finally, opening her eyes to meet Cale's. He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips for the first time. "Then let us begin." The shadows surged forward, testing them both. Lyra raised her hands, letting the power within her flow freely. She could feel it responding to her will, bending the darkness around her, shaping it, controlling it. Every whisper of the curse, every twisting shadow tried to break her focus, to tempt her with fear. But she did not falter. Cale moved beside her, his presence steadying her, amplifying her power. Together, they became a force the shadows could not easily resist. The council watched in awe, unable to move, as the palace itself seemed to bow to their combined strength. "You are stronger than you know," Cale said quietly, almost a murmur meant only for her. Lyra felt a surge of determination. "I will not let this curse destroy anyone else," she said. "Not now! Not ever!" The shadows twisted violently, forming into shapes that mirrored Cale and her, as if mocking their bond. Lyra's hands glowed faintly, responding to the darkness with light. She felt a warmth spread through her, a strength born not only from power but from trust, courage, and a connection she had never known before. The curse howled, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the palace. The shadows reached toward them, clawing and whispering threats. But Lyra stood firm. She reached out, not with fear, but with purpose, and the shadows recoiled, bending to her will. Cale placed his hand over hers. "Together," he said. "Always together." Lyra nodded, letting their combined strength flow into the palace, into the throne room, into the very stones beneath their feet. The shadows screamed and twisted, resisting, but they could not overcome the unity of the Alpha King and the girl he had chosen. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the darkness shattered. The shadows dissolved into mist, the whispers faded, and the red light of the blood moon seemed less threatening, turning instead into a soft, warm glow. The palace was still, quiet, free from the oppressive weight that had lingered for centuries. Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Cale knelt beside her, placing a hand on her back, steadying her. They breathed in unison, the bond between them stronger than ever. "You did it," Cale said softly. "You have freed this place and yourself." Lyra shook her head, a mixture of relief and awe washing over her. "We did it," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." Cale's gaze softened, and for the first time, Lyra saw vulnerability in his stormy gray eyes. "And yet," he said, "there is still work to be done. Freedoms are fragile. Trust must be guarded. The world outside these walls, it will test you both." Lyra nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Freedom was never permanent. Danger would always linger, but she had faced the shadows, she had faced fear, and she had discovered strength she never knew she possessed. And she had discovered something else: connection, trust, and perhaps even love. The council approached cautiously, their faces a mixture of fear, awe, and gratitude. They bowed to Cale and Lyra, recognizing the bond that had saved the kingdom. For centuries, the curse had held them in fear, and now, for the first time, there was hope. Cale stood, extending a hand to Lyra. "You have proven yourself," he said. "Not just to me, but to this kingdom. You are part of it now, whether you like it or not." Lyra took his hand, feeling warmth and strength flow through her as their fingers met. She realized that she was no longer the girl who had tried to hide in the crowd. She was no longer the girl who had feared her own abilities. She was strong, capable, and ready to face whatever came next. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady. "Ready for whatever comes." Cale's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good," he said. "Because this is only the beginning." They walked through the palace together, hand in hand, their bond unshakable. The shadows of the past had been conquered, but the world beyond the palace walls was vast, dangerous, and filled with unknown challenges. Yet for the first time, Lyra did not feel fear. She felt power, purpose, and a sense of belonging. The palace seemed different now, brighter, lighter, filled with the possibility of a future that had once seemed impossible. The throne room, once dark and oppressive, now carried a sense of hope. The curse that had haunted the kingdom for centuries had been broken, but its lessons remained. Strength, courage, and trust were not gifts. They were earned. Lyra and Cale stood together before the throne, looking out over the kingdom bathed in the soft light of dawn. The city below was waking, unaware of the battles fought in the palace, unaware of the shadows that had tried to claim it. "You changed everything," Cale said quietly, his hand still holding hers. Lyra shook her head. "We changed everything," she corrected again. "Together!" Cale nodded, a rare softness in his gaze. "Together," he agreed. For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the first light of day touch the rooftops and towers. The shadows of the past were gone, replaced by the possibility of a future they would shape together. And though they both knew the world would test them again, they also knew they were no longer alone. The palace doors opened, letting in a warm breeze that carried the scent of the city and the promise of new beginnings. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. She had faced fear, faced the curse, and discovered her own strength. And she had discovered something even more powerful: the courage to trust, to connect, and to embrace her destiny. Cale squeezed her hand gently. "The world awaits," he said. Lyra smiled, a sense of peace and determination settling over her. "Then let's face it," she said. "Together." And as they stepped forward into the light, seemed to breathe with them. No longer a place of shadows and fear, but a home, a sanctuary, and a symbol of their triumph.